for more analysis of the Kyrgyz unrest, let's now cross to London, where I'm joined by Andrew McEntee. He's an international human rights lawyer and former European security observer in Kyrgyzstan. Thanks very much indeed for joining us, Mr. McEntee. Now, the unrest is being linked with inter-ethnic tension, but also southern Kyrgyzstan is the stronghold of supporters of the former President Bakiyev. So what or who is motivating these latest clashes, do you think?
Undoubtedly, there is some inter-ethnic tension because over the past couple of decades there has been, and around about 1990, several hundred people died as a result of Kyrgyz-on-Uzbek tensions. However, today the situation clearly is different. We're in what's for some people a transition, and for others is an opportunity for frustrating the transition. Now, I've no doubt that on some instances on the inter-ethnic front, there'll be some individual violence. But on the scale it's reaching, there's no doubt whatsoever that political actors and security services actors, locally and at national level, are pulling the strings behind the scene, trying to steer this violence as a tool for their own opportunities, either opportunities to support the transition to the new government in the October elections, or to frustrate that transition of the new government.
Could this develop into a civil war, do you think?
Well, I think civil war is quite a wide term. I prefer to look at it in terms of civil unrest, in the sense that violence has its place in a country like Kyrgyzstan as part of a patchwork of unrest, of civil unrest. I mean, if you look at the map of Kyrgyzstan, look at the topographic details, it's such a mountainous country from north to south and east to west. You can't really move hardware, you can't move armoured vehicles. Communications are very difficult at the best of times, even for the military. So no one wants a civil war. But I think what is happening is that there are factions in the south in particular which are trying to use the situation, including using violence, as a means, as a tool of negotiating with the central government. I think it's important to remember that even though Bakiyev has left the country, he's not the objective. The objective of bringing him back is not what this is about. It's about his allies, his supporters, people who've benefited financially with other opportunities, power and influence at national, regional and village level. They want to retain what they're about to lose. And that process has been going on for a couple of months. But now it's getting very tense. They must frustrate the referendum, which is taking place in 2 weeks' time.
And surely it doesn't put the interim government in a very good light, does it? I know you were saying it's quite a complicated geographical country, and a lot of this unrest is down in the south. Can that interim government, do you think, have any influence in the south to restore some sort of order and stop it from spreading further throughout the country?
Well, I mean, a lot is said about Bakiyev's support base being in the south. And while that is true, that's not to say that 100% of people in the south support Bakiyev. Not by any means. Not along ethnic lines or even political party lines. That's quite clear from the voting patterns in the past, taking into account the massive fraud over the years. So I do think it's much more important to say that Bakiyev was the glue that held together his government, which held together the nepotism and the corruption, which gave opportunities for power and influence to people who supported him.
Of course, Russia...
Their base is mostly in the south.
Yeah, sure.
And yes, indeed. Crucially, Russia, just like the United States, is supporting a managed transition. The Russians have been very clear about that, as have the United States.
Well, they've got, clearly, both countries have got interest there, particularly with their military bases in the country. But will we see more external influence from perhaps Russia and the US getting further involved in what's happening there?
Well, the military bases belonging to Russia and the United States are symptoms of the interest, the strategic interest that Russia and the United States have in the region. I mean, Russia because it's their backyard, both Russia and the United States because of the oil and gas supply lines going through the region, because of Afghanistan and supply lines and so on for the United States. So, and the Russians have said very clearly, although it's not clear how they would enforce this, but they've said that they will protect Russian ethnic citizens in Kyrgyzstan. Now, so far it hasn't come to that, but it seems to be in the interests of Russia, the United States, and the international community to have a stable region. Although there's violence just now, their interest will be in managing the situation together with the local actors on both sides in Kyrgyzstan to reach some sort of negotiated settlement which will be within the framework of international standards for democratic elections, respect for human rights and so on. Both the United States and Russia are part of the OSCE, the Organisation for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and they often use the OSCE to go in as a negotiating tool to bring the parties around the table and to negotiate this. So this is one of the ways that they may use their influence rather than directly intervening, and much more consistent with the international community's interests in the whole of Central Asia region.
Just finally, unlike other Central Asian countries, it really has suffered a turbulent recent history, hasn't it? What, 5 years since the Tulip Revolution, 2 months since the ousted President Bakiyev and the resultant unrest there, and now this, of course, happening. Why do you think this country is suffering from so much instability at the moment?
Well, there has been an attempted transition away from the former Soviet times. But as in many countries in Central Asia and the Caucasus and to some extent Eastern Europe, those who had power 20 years ago have never really wanted to hand it over. And those who've regained it have held on to it by sort of fair means or foul. The situation really in the past 5 years was for sure that the Bakiyev was a great disappointment to people. The objective now, whoever is negotiating the settlement over the months ahead, must be to make sure that everyone in Kyrgyzstan, all of the elites, all of the people who support them from national, regional and village levels, get a piece of the pie. Without that, instability will continue. I mean, I've seen it at first hand. People have been very disappointed at being marginalised, kept out of the economic sector, no job opportunities unless the head of the village or someone in the town hall is going to give the job because you're a relative or some sort of ally. That's no way to run a country like Kyrgyzstan. It's certainly not inside the international commitments that Kyrgyzstan has given over the past 20 years to have a country based on democracy, rule of law and human rights. And there's far too much corruption, there's far too much trafficking going through the region, there's far too many factors for instability. And I mean, I do think the people who are running the country just now and the people who have been kicked out a couple of months ago are smart enough to realise that none of them are strong enough alone to carry Kyrgyzstan through as a strong state. They must work together, otherwise they'll all fall apart.
Very interesting to hear what you have to say there. Thank you very much indeed. Andrew McEntee, an international human rights lawyer and also lawyer, I should say, and a former European security observer in Kyrgyzstan itself. Very interesting to hear your views. Thanks very much indeed for joining us.